All right, let's break down one of America's most iconic political rituals, the State of the Union. This thing started out as just a constitutional duty, but it's blown up into this massive, high-stakes political spectacle, and we're going to get into exactly how that happened.
So I want you to imagine it's 2026. The president is stepping up to the podium, and you can just feel the tension in the air. This isn't just some speech, it's the absolute epicenter of a nation that is deeply, deeply divided. So what exactly is this battlefield looking like?
The scene is an absolute powder keg. Just hours before the address, the Supreme Court drops a bombshell, rebuking the president's economic policies. At the exact same time, there's a huge military operation kicking off overseas, and back here at home, well, Homeland Security is partially shut down. And to top it all off, you've got dozens of lawmakers who aren't even in the room. Nope, they're outside, leading a rival rally they're calling the People's SOTU.
So you have to ask yourself, right? Was it always this crazy? To really get how a formal report to Congress morphed into this political pressure cooker, we've got to rewind the clock. Way back.
And look, this shift from a boring old report to the primetime drama we see today, it didn't just happen by accident. It was pushed along by some really powerful personalities, changing politics, and of course, game-changing technology.
The format of the address was really shaped by the presidents themselves, their personalities. George Washington kicked things off pretty cautiously, just a short 1,100-word update. But then came Thomas Jefferson. He wasn't a great public speaker, and he thought the whole thing felt a little too much like a king addressing his subjects. So he switched to just sending a written report. And for over a century, that's how it was. Until Woodrow Wilson came along and saw a huge opportunity. He brought back the in-person speech, turning it into this powerful tool to talk directly to Congress and really the entire country.
So this slide, it really just nails the transformation, right? On one hand, you had a dry, kind of bureaucratic memo just for Congress, and now you've got a globally televised event all polished and produced for maximum political persuasion. It's a whole different ballgame.
But technology was the real game changer here. In 1923, radio suddenly puts Calvin Coolidge's voice right in people's living rooms. Then, by 1947, Truman's on TV, and boom! Suddenly how you look matters. The optics become critical. And in 1965, LBJ makes the genius move to put the speech in primetime, turning it into a can't-miss media event. And then, of course, the internet comes along and takes the whole thing global.
Okay, but let's go beyond the cameras for a minute. Inside that chamber, there are these ancient traditions and some pretty intense security secrets that most of us never get to see.
So the president's arrival, it's not just a casual walk-in. It's this whole choreographed thing, with the protocol getting more and more important. First the Supreme Court, then the cabinet. And that iconic announcement, it actually used to be done by an official called the doorkeeper. But since 1995, that job belongs to the House Sergeant-at-Arms, basically the chief cop of the chamber.
All right, check this out. Let's talk about the ultimate symbol of power in that room, the House Mace. Back in 1841, you know how much it cost to make? Just $400. Okay, so today, that's about $12,000. But its power? Way, way more than that. It's not just for show. If a member of Congress starts getting out of line, the Sergeant-at-Arms can literally present the mace to them as a command to restore order. It's this silent, incredibly powerful symbol of the House's authority.
But maybe the craziest secret of all is the designated survivor. Sounds like something out of a movie, right? But it is very real, and it comes from some Cold War-era fears. Think about it. You have the entire U.S. government, the president, the vice president, Congress, the Supreme Court, all in one room. So one cabinet member is taken to a secret, secure location, ready to lead the country if the absolute unthinkable happens.
So in our 2026 scenario, the person from the executive branch is the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. But what's really interesting is that there's also a legislative survivor, a member of Congress who is also kept safe, ready to help rebuild that branch of government if they had to.
Okay, so for a long, long time, this whole event was all about strict decorum, right? But man, that has completely shattered over the years. Now, the chamber is basically a stage for partisan fights.
In this timeline, it just tells the whole story of how that politeness has just eroded. It started with these kind of subtle moments, like President Nixon's Freudian slip when Watergate was breathing down his neck. But from there, it's just escalated to open heckling and outright acts of defiance, right there on the House floor.
But this moment in 2009, wow, this was a total shock to the system. When a congressman actually shouted, "You lie," at President Obama during his speech, it was more than just an outburst. It was like a switch flipped. The old rules of decorum were officially dead.
And then the defiance got even more visual, more theatrical, in 2020. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, standing right there behind the president, just tore her copy of his speech clean in half. It was a totally silent protest, but man, was it powerful. It was broadcast live everywhere and instantly became the image of just how divided the country was.
And all of this brings us right back to where we started, our 2026 scenario, where all these trends, the spectacle, the division, the open resistance, they're all colliding at once in this incredibly intense moment.
And at the very heart of this division is something pretty simple. The two parties are basically living in two different realities. I mean, just take the economy. You ask Republicans, and almost half of them say things are good or excellent. You ask Democrats, only 10% agree. How do you even start a conversation about a path forward when you can't agree on something that basic?
You know, even the guests, the people sitting up in the gallery with the First Lady, have become part of the fight. It used to be about celebrating American heroes together. Now it's a messaging war. The administration invites guests who highlight their agenda, and the opposition invites guests who highlight the supposed failures of that same agenda. They're sitting in the same room, but they are telling two completely different stories about America.
And really, that's the whole story of the State of the Union, isn't it? It went from being a simple to-do list for Congress to being a giant mirror held up to the country. And right now, that mirror is showing some pretty deep fractures.
So, as the president steps up to that podium in our 2026 scenario with the nation about to celebrate 250 years, you're left with this one big question. Does this whole ritual still have the power to unite a nation, or has it just become another engine of our division?